I want to bring on this guy. He's a great presidential historian and author, also lecturer, and our former colleague at KGO, John Rothman, everybody. Hi, John.
Hi, Mark.
What were your takeaways from what the president said last night?
You know, I'm an old speech teacher and a speech coach, and I used to go to tournaments where I would judge how people spoke. And I have come to the conclusion there are two critical factors. One is the content. And I have to tell you, if I were writing his content, the inaccuracies were absolutely unbelievable. The other was his delivery. And you must understand from a delivery point of view, just in terms of standing there and belting it out, he did a very effective job. What impressed me about last night was the division in the House. You know, the old expression of Lincoln's, a house divided against itself cannot stand. That's the House of Representatives. The Democrats clearly do not agree with Donald Trump, and the Republicans, even those who know better, are unwilling to stand up and face him because they're afraid of retribution.
Yeah, I think you saw that very much on display. There was a moment that was, and you know, Donald Trump, brilliant performer, as I've said. I mean, he really does. And I know I always get angry emails when I say it, so I probably should stop saying it.
No, it's true, Mark. It's true.
Great,
that's
he
my
really
whole
loves
point.
the media. Yeah,
that's the point I was trying to make to you. His delivery is, in terms of drama, is superb.
Yeah, he really takes the room. In fact, he called out the Democrats early. I know I'm not going to get applause from you guys, and I know you're not going to agree with anything that I say. It was as though he was challenging them to, you know, and calling them out early. But what I wanted to play for you, because he has a note, and there are a lot of theatrical moments like this with other presidents as well, where they, hang on, I have to sneeze.
And you know, this is really nothing to sneeze at, Mark.
What's that?
I said this is nothing to sneeze at.
Of course, it's a Rothman, Rothman-esque moment. I wanted to mention that these theatrical moments are oftentimes played up by other presidents as well. They'll stock the gallery with various people, and they'll make a point about so-and-so. He's a pipe fitter out of Michigan, and, you know, he lost his family and the such and such. So there's a lot of that.
That was Ronald Reagan's technique. He's the one who introduced the whole idea.
So Trump did the same thing, but Trump, of course, does it with a real flair for the dramatic. He's very performative in most everything he does, Trump. And he, at one point, had this 13-year-old who I guess has brain cancer. Do we have the moment? Go ahead and play it if you would, please, Matt. Because I thought it was interesting. A couple of things here. I can't hear any audio on it, but
it's not playing. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Maybe.
No, still no audio. But you know, you had in the gallery, you had several people who intersected with their lives and stuff he's talking about. Law enforcement. One person lost, that woman you're seeing now, she lost her family. He was a law enforcement officer.
But it's her husband.
Her husband, yeah.
Yeah, who leapt into the breach, if you remember.
No, I don't. What was that? I'm sorry. What was the, specifically again? It was the, he was...
She's the one with a 1-year-old child. Her husband threw himself into the line of fire and was killed.
That's right. Okay, thank you. So that's a special moment, especially when I think Trump likes to align himself with the cops. I mean, the oddity of that moment is associated with the January 6th protest and storming of that same body where he's making the speech, where police officers were beaten close to death by the angry mob. So if you're on the side of the cops, how come you have been so much in defense of the J6ers that you pardon them all? It's an extraordinary thing, but that really wasn't...
I got to tell you what blew me away is on Friday, and I came on your show briefly and I appreciated that opportunity. We saw an incident in the Oval Office that defies history. We've never had such a thing. And you would think 72 hours later that it would still have had an impact on people in the House of Representatives. The Republicans completely overlook it. In fact, they call it a triumph. And J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, who may well be America's next president, remember he's only a heartbeat away, J.D. Vance is already deprecating our allies, including Great Britain, in such a fashion that our allies are furious. You opened with something, Mark, and you said something that I think was very important. The world order that has existed since World War II is now being shattered by Donald Trump. And that, to me, is absolutely beyond comprehension. it was a tag team, Trump and Vance ganging up on Zelensky. And may I say, why was Trump able to read that letter last night from Zelensky saying he wanted new talks? Because Zelensky is being blackmailed into this by Donald Trump. He's being forced. And I must say, it's extortion. But that's Donald Trump's technique. It is extortion. And it is tragic that we are now in a position where, well, his numbers are completely wrong about the amount of money we've given to Ukraine, completely wrong about how much money the Europeans have given to Ukraine, completely wrong about the Europeans being repaid, which is untrue. Now he wants the mineral rights in Ukraine. And I can tell you it is extortion. That's all it is. But Zelensky has his back against the wall. There is no choice. He has to play ball with Donald Trump. And when they talk
really,
about playing cards, remember in that conversation, the simple truth is Zelensky doesn't have many cards to play, even if Europe does back him. So
well, it's not even a card game anymore. He's signing this at gunpoint. I mean,
you heard the news this morning. The United States is now withholding intelligence information from the Ukrainians. Do you know what that means?
Mentioned that earlier.
It's a horrific blow.
Yeah.
And he suspended aid as well. Yeah, I can only tell you, and I really want you all to understand this. This is an impeachable offense. He doesn't have the right to impound funds that Congress has appropriated. He is betraying an alliance, which has been longstanding. The hatefulness and the vindictiveness of Donald Trump, whose anger at Zelensky stems from the first impeachment, where he, Donald Trump, tried to blackmail Zelensky into giving him dirt on the Bidens and the Biden family, is just, it's unconscionable. And I kept thinking to myself, if the Democrats had pulled this, the Republicans would have been up in arms. And the fact that Republicans are silent is shameful, a shame on the Republican Party.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's the shame. There's enough to go around. So last night, I'll just mention it because I just think it's quite important that the moments that our theater can sometimes play to all sorts of ends, and the theatrical moment of last night with that little kid, the 13-year-old, is heartbreaking. You see he has brain cancer. His father is there, lifts him up for the front of the gallery, and the head
of the Secret Service gives him his little badge, and the little boy, very excited, gives him a big hug.
Yeah, there it is. We're showing it to you now. That's the little kid who is, waving to the gallery. That's his dad, lifting him up. And I was struck, of course, because it's a super moving moment, and it's hard not to be hit by the emotion of that, by both the emotion of that child's struggle, and also how Donald Trump, in an instant, his administration has stopped funding for cancer research, the very things that might help others, if not this 13-year-old.
Exactly.
He's
and may
undermined.
I point out to you, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want you to know, yesterday, Robert Kennedy Jr. did a whole thing on the measles epidemic. He listed a whole series of things you could do, and you know what was missing from the list? The vaccination. It's grossly irresponsible and wrong. And I say this emphatically. I don't care if you're a Trump supporter or not. It's wrong. It's bad science. And the arrogance of Donald Trump, who, by the way, personalizes everything. He is the victim. He is the one who was prosecuted or persecuted politically. I found it to be offensive in every single way. And although the Democratic response, which was 11 minutes long, but you can't respond in 11 minutes, and you're not talking about being able to respond to the text. The old days when, if you were in high school or college debate, that you took notes and then you got up and you really gave a rebuttal. Now, that could happen if somebody who had the skill to do it. But nobody who would be approached to do that, and all of these 10 to 11-minute rebuttals are completely forgettable. Although Senator Slotnick,
thank you, Tammy, for making the point that I was making. NIH child cancer defunded or stalled. I mean, this is against the backdrop of that. This is the moment you're going to play. You're going to hold up a 13-year-old who had brain cancer, even as you defund and put on a sudden freeze all of the potentially incredible breakthrough research. I mean, apparently they're making some serious breakthroughs in the treatment and discovery of the causes of the different kinds of cancers. People who know anything about cancer, you know, it has all of these different sources. It's the same, we can talk to the doctor when he gets here because I don't know that much, but I know that the reason you can't find one silver bullet for cancer is because they all manifest and they all really have their origins in different ways, different reactions in the body.
You understand? He's cutting funds. He's cutting
Defunding health
funds
and
for
science.
research.
So as they hold the 13-year-old up, I'm weeping on the inside, but also weeping for the lack of research funds that we had dedicated to trying to help 13-year-olds who have cancer like that. And the last thing I would say is a smart-ass thing to say, which is they made him a Secret Service agent last night. They gave him the badge. Isn't that what you said, John?
Yes.
No, they gave him, and I thought to myself, well, you know what? He's as qualified as everybody else in that administration. That 13-year-old who has absolutely no, I mean, I understand he's not really going to be an agent. This is a ceremonial moment, but I'm thinking it points up and reminds me how everybody in that administration essentially just got there an hour ago. Most of them have no sense of government. So
May I throw one other thing out? I know we have limited time, but I want to make this clear. Donald Trump has nominated for Solicitor General of the United States and another for Deputy Attorney General, both of whom are saying that the president has the right to defy the courts. I want you to understand the court yesterday on a 5-4 ruling with the 4 conservative justices voting as a block. It's astounding to me. It's the complete corruption of the American political system. And the independence of the courts is so vital. But you know that with Alito and Thomas, particularly those two on the court, that Donald Trump really thinks he can ride over all of this. And then
we'll see what happens with this aid money. I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled that the aid money must be spent. It must be released.
No, what they said, they put a temporary hold. It's a 5-4 decision. And but we don't
put
know
a hold on
outcome
his hold,
yet.
didn't they?
Yeah, but it's temporary.
Okay, but I get it. But I mean, temporary meaning that the money that was dedicated has already been appropriated must be spent there, right?
Yes, yeah. But only with a final verdict. This was simply a preliminary judgment. It's not the final word yet. And if you read Samuel Alito's dissent, he criticized his colleagues for even going that far. I mean, it's.
Oh well, that I don't even need to read Alito's dissent. I get it. I mean, he's not going to. You know, Alito and Thomas are in the pocket of Trump. But I mean, my God, Alito's house. What flag are they flying today?
I know. I know. But people don't remember that. Do you understand? What you and I remember, most people don't. And I'm not going to be sidetracked on this because in the end, there are only 2 brakes that can be put on all of this. One is the Supreme Court, which I believe will ultimately have to rule, and the second are the midterm elections. And the American people are going to have to really speak loudly in that midterm election. If the American people fail, we're in deep trouble.
Well, I mean, this presumes a lot. I'm concerned about the next election. The tariff situation is underway, John. And
yeah, you heard what happened this morning? They're easing the tariff just on the automobile industry for 1 month. So that was a breather. But evidently, this morning, President Trump spoke with the Prime Minister of Canada, and the White House read was that it was not particularly positive, but not negative. That is to say, it was sort of a neutral discussion. But I can tell you, my friends in Canada are absolutely livid over it, and the Mexicans the same. Do you remember the Republican Party, which favored free trade? Remember Ronald Reagan's great achievement was free trade agreements between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, a North American free trade zone. What Donald Trump has just done is repudiate the entire Reagan philosophy.
Well, forget about Reagan. I mean, they picked up that it's GOP philosophy. GOP are free marketers. I mean, you know, as you say, they might have been led by Reagan, but I mean, they've really completely deep-sixed everything in fealty to this man. And it's not just Mexicans and Canadians who should be bothered. I think there is going to be a lot of agitation here in this country. I mean, there will be higher prices on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And it's not only, it's here, it's China, it's Japan, it's many of our major trading partners. This is a very serious issue. And the American people don't grasp it yet. And the Republicans seem, and this is what bothers me, the Republicans seem to just march in line. Even those who call themselves Reagan Republicans are not willing to stand up and be counted. So it's very disturbing. And I did want to emphasize again this question of defiance of the courts. If you have a Solicitor General of the United States and you have a Deputy Attorney General advising the president he can defy the courts, and if the Supreme Court were to rule against Donald Trump, and he simply said, well, to hell with you, it's very serious. I also wanted to comment on J.D. Vance and his comments about Ukraine. What J.D. Vance said, deprecating the whole issue of Great Britain and its role, was infuriating and completely irresponsible for a vice president of the United States. And so we have a long way to go in terms of resolving this. Somebody said, well, what if Trump were removed from office? And I said, the answer is you'd have J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
And J.D. Vance is no great blessing, I can assure you.
I understand the anger, and I understand the outrage. I understand the fury of the opposition, but the calls for impeachment, et cetera, they're just absurd. I mean, this
They
guy,
are.
Can
you explain? We should explain. Even though there are grounds, if the Democrats control the House and the Senate, there certainly would have been an impeachment resolution. But the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee is Jim Jordan. And with Jordan as the chair and the Republicans in the majority, there's just no point. Nothing can harm Donald Trump from that.
The last thing that John said, I mean, everything John said is right, but I mean, in the majority, you just can't, you're not the majority, you're the minority. You can't do anything. And
That's right.
I mean, sadly, that's just look, I'll state it bluntly. The guy engineered a coup. He engineered a coup on this nation. Trump tried first legal means. He protested the election results with Giuliani running ahead of that parade. And then through a series of changes he made at the highest levels of the Justice Department, he tried to sow doubt about and chaos about the election. You know, he replaced his attorney general with a guy who he asked to make an announcement saying there are questions about the election, because all he needed was the cloud of question to be out there for him to intercede, for then any number of things to happen to allow him to remain in power. When that didn't work, we ended up with the forcible takeover of Congress. And so when you can't impeach a guy for that which I just described, and I just broad stroked it, he had fake electors. There are a lot of things. I mean, it wasn't just kind of my interpretation of events. The trail of breadcrumbs is clear. And when you can't impeach and remove a guy on the basis of that, then there's no getting him on any of these other things.
I regret to say that you are correct.
John, how do you game out what's going to happen at Social Security?
Social Security, first of all, is not an entitlement in the sense that of anything more or less than you paid into it and you should get it back. Donald Trump has pledged, as Kim McAllister pointed out earlier, that he is not going to tamper with that. But if you watch the cutbacks in Social Security, you talk about what the Social Security Administration is doing now. And by the way, the absurd piece that you played about 250-year-old people collecting Social Security, you have to understand exactly right. Social Security is under attack. If the American people understand that, they won't stand for it, because the Social Security that I paid in, that is there for me, is not an entitlement. It's what I put into it, for heaven's sake. And I'm entitled to have it out when I want it. And so I think this is something that everybody needs to understand. The same thing applies to Medicaid. People don't understand the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, but there are 80 million Americans who have Medicaid benefits. And if they lose those benefits, believe me, we are in deep trouble.
These are, well, you just said they don't understand it. Why don't you explain it? I mean, these cuts that you're talking about in Medicaid, these are designated and directed toward those who need help the most in our society.
That is correct. And it's part of the state program as well. So what you're dealing, that's why we have Medi-Cal. But the whole point being that Social Security and Medicare should be sacred to the American people. We are a nation that depends on those two programs. And I think when you talk about chopping those programs or reducing those programs, I think the American people won't stand for it. You remember, by the way, after the 2004 election, George W. Bush talked about making making a Social Security voluntary. Had he done that before the election, he would have lost for sure. And after the election, he proposed it and then had to step back because there was such anger about that. By the way, the other question of the farmers, if you heard what Donald Trump tried to do, saying that I'm the farmer's best friend, farmers know he isn't. And these tariffs are going to have a huge impact on farmers across the country. And by the way, did you hear the chairman of Target, the president of Target, who made the statement clearly, if these tariffs go through, prices are going to go up. And the American people won't blame Joe Biden. I got to make one other comment. I just keep going. But the idea of a president of the United States attacking his predecessor, as Donald Trump did last night on more than one occasion, was to me absolutely shocking. And I think it is infuriating because, well, you heard it in the Oval Office in the conversation with Zelensky. Why was Trump so angry? Because if you remember that so-called perfect phone call, Trump wanted dirt on the Biden family and on Joe Biden.
Well, he didn't. He wanted just the announcement of the investigation. I think
he wanted dirt.
There was no dirt to get. I mean,
that's not the point. Do you think
that is very much the point. He just wanted. He just wanted. Now I like it because now we're arguing. I'm always happiest when I'm arguing with Rothman. He wanted the announcement. If there was dirt there, great. But what he wanted was they were an announcement that he could work with, that they were looking into. Isn't that look? You're the senior voice here, so you can
he
correct
wanted
me.
Dirt on the Biden family.
All right.
And you remember there was a prosecutor who was removed, and that is what really got to Trump, because he said it's clearly a cover-up. But whoever is right or wrong, we are now deflected, just as Trump wants us to be deflected, from the simple truth that Donald Trump is a disaster for American democracy and a disaster for our country's future. And every day you hear more and more and more of it. I want to go back to one thing, and that was Bobby Kennedy Jr., who listed, you should have Kim look it up. Yeah, I'm always telling you these things, but to see, he listed a whole bunch of stuff to combat measles and didn't mention the measles vaccine. Yeah. I mean, the absurdity is ridiculous.
The IRS is drafting plans now to cut its workforce by as much as half. It'll be a mix of layoffs, attrition, and incentivized buyouts. They, I was saying before, John, actually run a really efficient branch of government. The IRS is one of the most efficient in Washington.
Yeah. By the way, the IRS and the Social Security Administration.
Yeah.
He's gutting both, because then he can say, you see, they don't really work. We don't really need them. Of course, I just sat down with my accountant to go over my taxes. And if he wants to abolish the IRS, well, we can certainly talk about it as long as before April 15th.
Well, I mean, we can be glib about it, but the reality is that is the revenue machine for the U.S. I mean,
of course,
for a country that's so underwater, and all I hear about is how underwater we are, and I think we are on some level. You've got to look at this incredible resource, which is the IRS, and of course, the first thing they got rid of was everybody who's involved in the investigative part of the IRS that deals with higher net worth individuals.
And that's what they're doing in the FBI. I don't mean to prolong the agony with you, but I want to just point out that yesterday, the director of the FBI in New York, without cause, was dismissed. Of course, he is someone who has defended agents who have been accused of doing their job investigating January 6th. And when Kash Patel, as the new director of the FBI, said, well, we're not going after anybody. It's a lie. It's a blatant lie. They are. And the proof is what happened in New York yesterday.
At the IRS, just to round it off, they've already gotten rid of 7,000 of those probationary employees, right. Those who are in the first couple of years, or I think it's 1 year or less of service in the case of the IRS.
Have you called the IRS number recently with tax questions?
I have not.
Oh, try it. You'll see how difficult it is to get through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they would argue that that's the problem with the IRS and the problem with the government, that they don't handle the public's need for support in any kind of professional way, and that's why it's a waste of money. I would say, that's wrong. I mean, maybe you couldn't get through to the IRS. I don't know. But if you look at the Veterans Administration, it's run very well, actually. I mean, I think a lot of those who are on VA benefits and continue to get those, that's a an example of an organization very well run.
Amazing
And
program.
there are other parts of the government that run very well also. And I would just point you to private enterprise. Everybody thinks, oh, private enterprise, they handle everything better. Really? Do they? Have you tried to
Nope.
reach the cable company? Try to call your cable company or DirecTV or whatever your jam is. I mean, that's private industry. Private military. We pay 50 to 100 times sometimes what we're paying for private service members to handle the same job. It's great. The privatization argument is another one bankrupt of any legitimacy.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. And the American people will catch on. I believe Trump will be brought down by his own hubris. I think he's cutting off his nose to spite his face. And all you have to do is take a look at all the claims that Doge made, which have had to be withdrawn because, well, you and I both know it's really a whole fraud. Donald Trump and Elon Musk
Doge is a complete fraud. That's why I like that Elon steals. I was kind of rating the signs last night, the signage that was held up, and I like that Elon steals. Excuse me, John. Last thing on the way out here, tell me what the appropriate protest is when you're there in an august body like Congress, but the rules you've seen change a little bit. The culture has changed with people shouting things, wearing those hats, dressing in various colors. There's this sort of messaging within that, again, general decorum that's associated with that body. What is acceptable in your judgment?
You know, I have to tell you, Mark, you've been in because you grew up there, you've been in the House chamber. I consider it a sacred place, and I do not believe it is a place for demonstrations. That's what bothered me about January 6th. What I believe is that the leadership of the Democratic and Republican parties need to establish certain rules which exist for the benefit of the institution and their members. There was an article many years ago in Look magazine or Life magazine dealing with the question of masters of the House, and it dealt with the Democratic leader, who was Sam Rayburn, and the Republican leader, who was Joe Martin. Not only were opposites politically, but they were best friends, and they kept decorum in the House. And that is precisely what should happen. Same thing applies in the Senate. What you're seeing now is a complete change of what used to be a convivial operation. You could it's like, if I may use the best example, you can use Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. They went at each other right and left, but at night, cocktail hour, they got together and swapped stories. But I'm afraid those days are gone. What bothers me is if you look behind Donald Trump, if you look at the speaker and the vice president, these two individuals who have encouraged this kind of disunity and lack of respect, it's just, to me, an American tragedy. And may I say, if I may cap it by saying, that's what last night was, an American tragedy. But fortunately, we will recover. And I believe that with all the power and hope that I can muster, because if we don't, this country is in deep, deep trouble. Just ask the world. The world is counting on us. And what do we have as a president? Somebody who doesn't understand the world. It's just terrible.
You can hear more of John Rothman with his podcast. It's a daily offering. You can get it. It's called Around the Political World with John Rothman. You can also find John Rothman's musings in Voice. What is it? Voice of SF?
The Voice of San Francisco. Just so everybody knows, I do about 10 minutes every day on Around the Political World with John Rothman. No cost for that. And also 10 minutes from the Voice of San Francisco on local and state affairs. I do that every morning. It's 5 days a week, and we have a remarkable listenership, Mark. And I want to encourage everybody here. You need to understand, you may have heard KSFO shut down. That is, the KSFO is now KGO, but 560, which was KSFO's signal, is no longer in use. When you go to 560 on the AM dial, there's nothing there. It's nothing. And the fact that we no longer have the outlets of a KGO or a KSFO means we have to rely more fully on the wonderful work that Mark Thompson and Kim McAllister do every single day. And if you have not contributed, please do. We really believe in what you're doing, Mark. And I want to say that we appreciate the support that you get, and anything I can ever do to help anytime. You don't have to double my salary. Everybody should know I do not charge for my services with Mark Thompson.
And
I
we
have
get
such a
what we
high-
pay for. Am I right, everybody? Let me just say, how dare you, John? How dare you?
I have such a high regard for you that I'm willing to do it for nothing.
I love that you contribute the way you do, and we enjoy so much both you being available and also being here regularly. So
Anytime, Mark.
yeah.
Anytime.
John Rothman, everybody. See you, John. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.